Canada intends to recognize the State of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. Canada has long been committed to a two-state solution. An independent, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state living side by side with the State of Israel in peace and security.
In a stunning diplomatic pivot, Canada has announced it will formally recognize a Palestinian state this September at the United Nations. Prime Minister Mark Carney made the declaration on Wednesday, July 30th, saying the goal is to preserve the dream of a two-state solution, a dream he warns is now vanishing. Speaking to reporters, Carney said, "The prospect of a Palestinian state is literally receding before our eyes." Carney cited the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, accelerated Israeli settlement construction, and a controversial Knesset vote backing West Bank annexation as reasons for Canada's dramatic decision.
International cooperation is essential to securing lasting peace and stability in the Middle East, and Canada will do its best to help lead that effort. Canada has long been committed to a two-state solution. An independent, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state living side by side with the State of Israel in peace and security. For decades, it was hoped that this outcome would be achieved as part of a peace process built around a negotiated settlement between the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority. Regrettably, this approach is no longer tenable. Prospects for a two-state solution have been steadily and gravely eroded, including by the pervasive threat of Hamas terrorism to Israel and its people, culminating in the heinous attack of October 7, 2023, and the terrorist organization Hamas's long-standing violent rejection of Israel's right to exist and its rejection of a two-state solution. The accelerated settlement building across the West Bank and East Jerusalem, all the while settler violence against Palestinians has soared, has also undermined the process, as have actions such as the E1 settlement plan and this month's vote by the Knesset calling for the annexation of the West Bank, and the ongoing failure of the Israeli government to prevent the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian disaster in Gaza, with impeded access to food and other essential humanitarian supplies. The deepening suffering of civilians leaves no room for delay in coordinated international action to support peace, security, and the dignity of human life. Preserving a two-state solution means standing with all people who choose peace over violence or terrorism, and it means honoring their innate desire for peaceful coexistence of Israeli and Palestinian states as the only roadmap for a secure and prosperous long-term future.
But this recognition comes with conditions. Canada will proceed only if the Palestinian Authority commits to sweeping reforms, including a 2026 general election, one in which Hamas will have no role. Carney made it clear, there can be no place for Hamas in the future governance of Palestine. This marks a major shift in Canada's foreign policy, from insisting on peace talks first to now acting unilaterally in the face of worsening conditions on the ground.
For the reasons I cited earlier, Canada intends to recognize the State of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state. Canada will increase its efforts in supporting strong democratic governance in Palestine and the contributions of its people to a more peaceful and hopeful future. I spoke today with President Abbas at length to reaffirm his commitments. Canada reiterates that Hamas must immediately release all hostages taken in the horrific terrorist attack of October 7th, that Hamas must disarm, and that Hamas must play no role in the future governance of Palestine. Canada will always steadfastly support Israel's existence as an independent state in the Middle East, living in peace and security. Any path to lasting peace for Israel also requires a viable and stable Palestinian state, and one that recognizes Israel's inalienable right to security and peace.
Israel reacted furiously. The Israeli Foreign Ministry slammed the move, calling it a reward for Hamas that undermines ceasefire negotiations and hostage talks. Jerusalem accused Canada of emboldening terrorism at a time when Israel is still battling Hamas across Gaza. The rift between Ottawa and Jerusalem is now unmistakable and deepening. Carney, however, stood firm. He blamed the Israeli government for allowing what he called a catastrophe in Gaza to unfold, and warned that unless global action is taken, the two-state solution may soon be beyond rescue.
To say the devastation in the Middle East is deeply personal to many Canadians. Palestinian Canadians are watching as communities across Gaza face destruction and deprivation, and as communities in the West Bank are annexed. The heinous attacks of October 7th traumatized the Jewish people in Israel and here in Canada and around the world. With each day that the remaining hostages and the remains are not returned, families live in fear and grief. The rising anti-Semitism and words, actions, and violence, including against Jewish communities right here in Canada, is abhorrent. And it's why we're introducing legislation this fall that will make it a criminal offense to intentionally and willfully obstruct access to any place of worship, to schools and community centers. We will also invest in the physical protection of vulnerable communities and places of worship. Basic security is an inalienable right of every human being. We'll defend that right for every Canadian. The two-state solution that Canada supports is built on the promise of Israelis and Palestinians living side by side in peace and security. There are elements, and I listed them in my remarks, and they played a central factor in our decision. I think one of the core points is that Canada's had a long-standing principled stand, as you know. I won't repeat it. You're familiar with it. A belief in a two-state solution, the inalienable rights of both peoples, and the fact that peace and security could only be achieved through it. That prospect, that possibility of a two-state solution is being eroded before our eyes. The accelerated settlements, the potential partition of the West Bank, the actions in Gaza that shift large portions of the population, 80% of the population displaced, other actions which are changing the facts on the ground in a way that removes the possibility or lessens the possibility of there being a Palestinian state. And then when that is reinforced by votes to that effect, by statements and policies to that effect of the government, yes, that has been one of the factors that has brought us to this point to try to reverse with partners. We're not under illusions about the strength of Canada, but to reverse with partners this cycle so that a two-state solution becomes viable. Lots more has to happen for it to be there.